Hello and welcome to Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. I'm a psychological astrologer and I'm delighted to have the company of a fellow astrologer, Rebeca Eigen, today. Hello, welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Now, I've been looking at your charts. So just for our audience, you have a website called shadowdance.com and you call yourself an astrological marriage relationship fixer. So
that's actually new.
I love that. And I especially love it because I'm always happy when I see people seeing people's charts come alive. And lo and behold, oh my goodness, have you got a lot of Libra? Do you reckon you've got enough there? So you've got the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and Venus all in Libra. And then you have the North Node in the 7th house as well. So perhaps it might be nice to hear a little bit from you as to how you feel that's in how that informs who you are.
It was incredible. When I started studying astrology, I just, in 1985, and in 88, I started going to UAC conferences all over the United States. And I would just go to all the relationship tracks. That's all I would do. And for years, 10 years, I went and learned everything I could about relationships. And so it really, my friend Glenn Perry says, you're just like a runaway train. When you have a stellium like that, your interest is so limited. And then to top it all off, Saturn is right there in the middle. So that makes it even more.
Did you feel that this was something that came naturally to you, or was it something that you had to develop and work at?
Well, my very first consultation with an astrologer, he told me, at some point, you're going to find yourself counseling people and looking at marriages because you are so gifted with that. And I think what he meant was that being Libra, that I'm very fair and that I want to hear both sides all the time. And that is natural to me. That is just a natural inclination to be weighing the opposites. And so when I found Jungian psychology, that made it even more exciting to me.
Of course. And I don't think you had a choice, really. A North Node sitting right there in your 7th house. That was a call to action, I think.
Yes, in Aquarius, which is being married to the group, which has been such a strong part of me. I'm involved with so many people. Relationships is like part of my daily life. So in order to get any work done, I have to leave town to just be alone. And I'm going to do that soon because I want to write a new book. I really feel like the Pisces age of suffering and sacrificing is over, and that we need to move into Aquarius. To me, Aquarius is about the freedom to be ourselves and to be unattached to outcomes. It's like, you love me, great. You don't love me, that's okay too. I'm a citizen of the world and I love a lot of people. And so it's a different mindset than when I was really young, where I would fall madly in love with people that I didn't even know, because it was an illusion. The projections were so dramatic that it was an illusion. And then I would be completely committed to a person that I didn't even know. So now at 69, I feel like I have something to say about it all.
Well, we haven't said that this stellium in Libra is sitting in your 3rd house. So I'm not sure you've ever been short of words.
Not really. I actually think that my moon in Sag is very philosophical and can talk about philosophy of life and psychology forever, But when if you really look at it, when you have Saturn in the 3rd house, you're not much for chit chat. And you really don't know a lot of Gemini details about all kinds of things. And so you can be kind of lopsided in how you communicate. So
Yeah.
that's been a hardship for me, or a difficult thing, until I have made friends with Gemini so that I can listen to them talk about nothing, so that I can learn how to be social and just interact on a, everything doesn't have to be deep.
Yes, because you also have Neptune in the third house as well. And so it's light-hearted conversation could be a bit of a challenge, because it's going to be deep and sensitive, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm always listening to people's problems and thinking to myself, how can I help them look at it different? How can I help them see that hard aspect is actually a gift if they'll integrate it, So, yeah.
You talked about your moon in Sagittarius, and it's conjunct Mars as well. Well, not exactly a conjunction, not a tight one, but they're in the same sign. I meant, and they're in the fifth house, and that's a great place, to have Sagittarius in the fifth house. Except you then have Chiron in Capricorn sitting there. Does that spoil the party a bit?
No.
No. Good.
No, in fact, I am the karaoke queen, and I'm the social director. I'm the one letting everybody know we're going to meet at such and such place, or else it's going to be at my house. Playing has to be, I have to play. I have to have fun. And so I surround myself with people who are not really into astrology. They're into singing, and they're into just being at a party, bringing food, talking about, whatever, and really sharing our love for music and performance, because each karaoke person wants to be heard, right? They're not like a group or a choir. They're individuals.
Well, I'm delighted to see that you found a stage for your Leo ascendant. How wonderful. Well, that's I think that's given us a nice little glimpse into the reason why you are so interested in relationships, and I think it would be a good thing as well to see this in the context of your work. So, we've talked a bit about Libra, we talked about the seventh house, and you specialize in working in this area. So can you tell us a little bit about the seventh house as you see it?
Well, to me, the seventh house is initially your other, which looks like it's them, but it's actually a part of yourself. And when we're younger, we are fascinated by people who carry the energy of our seventh house, because that is the part that we least identify with. It takes a long time, actually, to take back those projections of what we see in others and make them part of ourselves. But the seventh house to me is something that has to be shared. It has to be shared with another person in an equal and balanced way. So any planet there, to me, is going to act like it's in an opposition to Venus. It's almost as if it's in an opposition to Venus, and it has to, first, we're going to see it outside of ourselves. And that relationship, whatever relationship we get into, it really has to be made to serve that energy. That energy has to be present in that relationship in an equal way. Otherwise, they're going to overdo it, and we're not going to like them.
So I think it might be useful then to think of it as, although the seventh house, we're used to thinking of it as being the other, it's more like the other is a reflection of something within us.
Yes, and that's where Jungian psychology is so valuable, because initially it's our shadow. It's the parts of us that we don't identify with, that we can be fascinated by, that we're afraid of, that we're actually afraid of. And then it can be shared in an intimate way with another person from a place of freedom. So it's really different when you recognize that what's unconscious in you, you're going to find fascinating in another person. I have a really cool quote on my website about that Jung gave on fascination. And he says, you wouldn't even be fascinated if it wasn't something unconscious in yourself.
And of course, the shadow means the converse can be true, where we are repelled by anything in others, but which actually has its root in ourselves. So perhaps you'd like to talk a little bit about that side of it.
Well, the shadow obviously is going to be things we don't know about. They're unconscious, they're denied, they're repressed, they're undeveloped. So when a person is overdoing something that we don't like, then we're going to be irritated by them eventually. I mean, most of us, after a while, realize that what we really were drawn to in a person, they start doing it to an extreme, and then we really don't like it at all. And that is initially the attraction, is that they're different from us. They seem to be different, but they're not. They're actually carrying a part of our own unconscious, and we need that part. And so I love what I do, because most people get into relationships, they don't know astrology, they don't realize that there's parts of them they don't know. And that these are the parts that astrology your blueprint can show you and give you tools to start to bring that back. And then it's still a process, because as you know, nobody has just one thing. It's always a lot of things that are going on in the psyche. Like for instance, for me, I have a Venus-Neptune conjunction. So I'm like Florence Nightingale when it comes to love, and the ruler of my 7th is in the 12th, which is the Neptune house. And the Neptune is in Libra. So 3 ways it is said that I'm going to be very Neptunian when it comes to love. So what is that? It's overly idealistic. It's overly, romantic, and creates fantasies about what could be instead of what is. And that can cause a lot of pain. That can cause a lot of pain and a lot of grief for people who don't know that this is something they're carrying that's in them, and it's a part of them. And then, at first I didn't like that when I found out. I don't like that. You mean I'm never going to be with anybody? That I'm always going to only be attracted to illusions? That I'm always going to be attracted to cheaters and people who are drug addicts or priests or somewhat unavailable? And then I realized how incredibly unavailable I am myself. And when you have the outer planets, there's only a part of you that wants to be in relationship. And then there's another whole part of you that's married to God when it's Neptune. And then there's a whole nother part of you when it's Pluto that is deeply psychological and cannot be, confined to one relationship. Each one of the outer planets presents its own problems.
What would you say?
What about you?
What would you say about somebody who's got many planets in the 7th house, and they might think, oh, this must mean that, relationships are easy, and then discover actually they're not. So what would you say about that, a packed 7th house?
I think a packed 7th house is here to do shadow work. They're here to learn about their own unconscious through the mirrors of other people. There's no way around it. I alone must become myself, but I cannot become myself alone. I need the mirror. And even if it's negative, we have to embrace that. We have to see that there's a healing that takes place when you can own your negativity. Later today, I'm going to actually give a talk on Facebook, and my topic is shadow work can heal many years of relationship struggles, because it's true. You know, when you can see and own your negative side. And so I'll give you an example. Somebody who came to me recently, and they were complaining about a really good friend and coworker that they felt was pushy and selfish and domineering and taking advantage by using the relationship, etc. And I look at her chart, and she's a Libra, and this other person is an Aries, and she has a Sun-Saturn conjunction in Libra in the 11th house. So that part of her that wants to be first and best, and that part of her that wants to be the authority, wants to be the person in charge, is being mirrored to her by this other person who she sees as selfish, but it's actually, she's quite a leader. And that's something she needs to develop. And then she has to speak up. You know, when that person pushed her out of line, she needs to just laugh and go, hey, whoa, wait a minute, how about me? And just get in there. It doesn't have to be abusive. It doesn't have to be ugly. It can be fun, actually, to take back those parts of us that we have denigrated to other people, that we reject in others.
I think also there's a temptation sometimes to live that seventh house part through another person. So I know we've kind of been skirting around and saying exactly that, but there is that temptation. And
there is, because it's unconscious.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
it's unconscious. So we need you to carry that for us. And if we don't get it with you, it's okay. It'll repeat. It'll come back around because it's your own energy. It can't even be in your face if it isn't. So that's what that quote on my website says, that Jung said. You can't be attracted to people. You cannot even draw them into your life without them having very similar energy. And when I put a couple's chart together, what I see immediately is how much alike they are, but they've split up the energy. I'll be this part if you'll be that part, because I don't really like that part. I don't want to be thought of like that. And so then the other person has to overdo it. And when they overdo it, it's uncomfortable for both people. I mean, I did that when I was married.
Yes. I was just thinking, you know, because we were talking about living through other people, but it always boils down to different parts of us, and the theory that's floating around that perhaps everyone in our lives is an illusion and a mirror of ourselves, a bit like, you know, the idea that every character in a dream is representative of us.
Yes.
And however mind-boggling that idea might be, it kind of works when you're looking at the seventh house to keep that in mind.
It does. And some seventh houses are not easy. You know, if somebody has Mars, Pluto, and Saturn conjunction in Virgo, for instance, in the seventh house, they can go through a lot of painful situations if they don't understand the dynamics of each one of those planets and how that's operating in them, but they don't know it. Sometimes you can actually see them. Everybody can see our shadow but us, right? I mean, shadow integration takes years and patience and being willing to be humble and see that the dark side of ourselves is only dark to the degree that we are unconscious of it and hidden from our awareness, because then it's going to be operating compulsively, autonomously, and then it will act out childishly in an infantile way. And then we will walk away and we'll ask ourselves, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Well, because we're like that, but we don't know it, you know? And so shadow work takes a long time. I mean, I don't think anybody can do shadow work just by understanding the concept. You have to live it. You have to go through it. You have to bring people into your life and do the work. Go home, write in your journal. My book is like a journal. I mean, it is. It's a workbook. You actually have to write. And there's questions to ask yourself at the end of 2 chapters, and I'm going to send you a copy.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
you have to do the pen and paper work. You have to say, okay, why is this in my life right now? Why at this particular time is this happening, and is it repeating?
And this is the issue I have when I read descriptions of the seventh house that make it sound ever so romantic, and it's all about love and everything fun and frilly. No, that belongs in the fifth house.
Yes.
That's have our fun. The seventh house is serious. It's so serious that it's a house where we have contractual relationships. In other words, it's so serious that we have to have codified rules of conduct, because that's what it comes to. So this is not a frivolous, fun house, because it's where I meet you, and I have to recognize that you have needs as much as I have needs. And failure to recognize either of those takes us into the hell of the eighth house. And so this is a really important house. It's a house that requires that I step out of my comfort zone, you step out of your comfort zone, and we label our baggage very neatly so that it doesn't get mixed up and there's no blame involved, and that everyone is responsible for themselves. No wonder this is also the house of open enemies.
Exactly. And we have to accept our differences. If we are only looking for a mirror, then as Richard Eidemann said long ago, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's one of my favorite astrologers long ago with some of his writings. But he said, if you're only looking for a mirror, then you are only living on the surface of life. And you'll never get into the deeper layers of uncovering your wholeness.
And you will also be missing out on the richness of what it is to have someone else turn the mirror back on you and say, hello, you could be better than this. I'm challenging you to be better than this. How about you be what you can be, instead of
that's Pluto
talk. Yeah, it's Pluto talk, but it's there, it happens. This is part of relating. So there's all these different levels of relating, because when somebody is genuinely challenging you and saying, is this the best that you can be? Is this the most honorable? Is this the most integrity that you could have? Are you being truly honest with yourself? And because they hold themselves to account too, then wow, think of the possibilities.
Yeah, I would somewhat turn that around a little bit, in that I wouldn't, I've learned to not have the expectations or the demands that anybody change. That when I change, it's interesting how they change, but it's not because I made them do it. So with time and age, I've surrendered to the fact that we're not completely in charge, that there is a higher purpose, that there is something that's orchestrating all of this. It's really phenomenal. And so all I can do is work on myself. For me, all I can do is work on myself. I can show you, I can share with you, look, this and this and this is part of your astrology. What do you think of that? And get them to talk about it.
Exactly.
But if they don't want to, it's not up to me to change anyone. And
That's right.
when you have Pluto rising, you've tried all your life to change other people, and then finally realized that the only person you needed to change was yourself. And I have Pluto rising, so it took me a long time to get that.
Exactly. And I think it's always, as I say, it's about the balance. It's keeping the balance. And when you are in relationship with someone, if you are with somebody who is honest with themselves,
yes,
95 to, let's say 95, because we're all fallible, 95% of the time, that's a challenge to you to be honest with yourself 95% of the time as well. And I think that that's really important, because that's the balance. And it's not about forcing anyone to change. And I like what you said about sometimes people changing, when we change.
Mhm.
And I think there's something in that, which is about the changing of the energy that you are exuding, emanating. I think perhaps emanating is a better word. That you're emanating has an effect whereby you relax, they relax. It's not the case all the time, because sometimes there are relationships that are never going to work, because it's a power struggle, and there's a person who is never going to give an inch. That's never going to work. But in many instances, when you relax, then the other person unconsciously relaxes, then you relax more, they relax more. And it's a very interesting dynamic that happens then.
It is. It is, because it's more natural, I've often also found with people that I work with, that if I can help them go into looking at their mother and father and the dynamics between their mother and father, and how either one of them have taken on wanting to marry their parents and work through those issues again with another person, and having to say to each other, I'm not your mother, I'm not your father, I want to be your partner. And so the truth, what you just said, is so important. If we are honest with each other and ourselves, then a real relationship can happen between those two people. But often, Freud said that we have 6 people in the bed: our mother and father, their mother and father, and us. So there's 6 total in the unconscious that we take with us into every relationship. And I don't even care, the 7th house is relationships in general too, not just marriage partners. It can be business partners. So you can, even if you're not married, you can turn around and do this with your business partner, or you can do it with your boss. You can do it with your best friend. You can do the work, the shadow work together with another person, and discover things about yourself you didn't know until you got into a relationship.
It's interesting you were talking about the parents, because I feel that very often you see the pattern of the parental relationship in the 7th house. So you could be looking at the person's relationship patterns, but you could equally be looking at the parental relationship dynamic. And what you're seeing is the mirroring of that, or the mimicking of that, because the child grows up with that as the template.
And what's phenomenal is if you have 5 siblings and you look at everybody's chart, and then you look at both your parents' charts. And I talked about this in detail, not too personal, but in detail about the astrological symbolism of this. But my mother had Jupiter and Neptune in Leo in the marriage house, and she was a double Scorpio. And my dad had Scorpio rising, and he had a Venus-Neptune conjunction. So they had this Venus-Neptune thing going on, and they also had this Pluto-Leo thing going on too. And as soon as my father passed away, my mother took that Leo on. She became that part of herself that she had allowed him to overdo for her whole marriage. And my siblings, every single one of us has Neptune strong with Venus or the moon, and Leo and Scorpio, all of us. But we're all completely different signs. I have a Pisces sister, a Taurus sister, a Sagittarius sister, but all of us have our parents in us.
We do. And there was something you said there that made me think, because, you were talking about your mother taking on the Leo because she'd been essentially allowing your father to do that for her. Well, it made me think about cats. Now, Yeah, a bit of lateral thinking here, but specifically stories I've heard where in households where there's been more than one cat, one of the cats dies and the other one, who'd always been very quiet, suddenly comes out of their shell. And you kind of think, was that because they were too afraid to, or too afraid to come out of their shell because there was a dominant cat in the house, or because they were hiding behind the other one? And we'll never know because we can't ask. But that I hear that a lot. And I have less so with dogs, although I have come across it with dogs as well. So, but that's that dynamic exactly that you're talking about. And it happens, of course,
Energy.
with all of us as well in one way or another.
Yeah, it's energy. I mean, we are all energy. The cat's energy too. I was delighted when my son has 5 planets in Libra. He was born on my Saturn return. He has 3 in Sag. I have 2 in Sag. He has Aquarius rising. I have Leo rising. We have everything almost identical. It's pretty profound. But he brought this cat to me and said, "Mom, you have to take him. He's a baby. He's very personable. He comes up to us, but we're so afraid a possum will get him because he's only like 5 or 6 weeks old and he's all by himself. He's all beat up." And my son knows I'm a Libra and that everything in my home is beautiful and that I have aesthetics is very important to me. And he said, "She's not going to like him because he's ugly. He's not very pretty." Bring him, so he brought the cat, and his name is Astro, and he is gorgeous, and he got cleaned up, and he has grown, and he has big blue eyes. He's just the most beautiful cat. Everybody loves him because he's real personable. But I think his moon's in Aquarius because that's how they connected. He was friendly to Kevin, and he came to Kevin. And I can tell the way he is. When he wants to be with you, it's fine. But if he doesn't want to, leave me alone. He has the moon in Aquarius. And that sounds like a cat thing, maybe, but I've had many cats. They're all different.
They are indeed. They are. And it's funny you should say that, because we had a cat that I am to this day convinced was a Virgo. And one of the things, quite aside from the fact that he was very particular about, how things were, and his routine was sacrosanct, he had a real liking for Virgos. Virgos that came into the house got special treatment from him. And so there is that energy. We are just so far digressing from the 7th house now.
I know, but you can cut that part out.
But the principles apply, because what we're talking about is this aspect of relationship, which is, as you said, about energy. And the 7th house can describe the dynamic that is at work when we are around other people, and the kind of energy that we experience from others and that we have within ourselves. If we are conscious of it, then we stand a good chance of, let's say, avoiding some of the minds that are waiting for us in the 7th house of relationships. The less conscious we are, the more explosive that 7th house can be. So I think that's the summary. And to see it actually with animals as well is a very interesting thing, to see those principles at work, because it shows just how important energy actually is when we're talking about attraction, repelling, conflict. It's all there. And so this is far from being the frilly house that many people make it out to be.
I agree. And the other thing is that it represents, it's representative of the other as of the 180 degrees opposite. So I have often found that people will come and they have oppositions, and it might as well be a 7th house issue, because they are, again, attracting, say, a Pluto Sun opposition. and they're seeing Pluto out there, and they're the sun. They can only identify with the sun part of themselves, and that Pluto part of themselves gets split off. And when anything is split off from the psyche, it turns against us. So one of my favorite quotes by Carl Jung, and I could never find it again. So I often wonder, did I make it up? Because I can't find it. Whatever one does not live, lives against one.
Yeah, that sums up the seventh house. A wonderful truth, and very much the seventh house. So if people wanted to find you, Rebecca, how could they do that?
Well, my website is shadowdance.com. I also have a YouTube channel that I did for about 20 episodes so far, 21 episodes, and it's called You and Astrology, where I invite people to just come have a 20-minute consultation just so they can see the value of looking at their astrology. And I don't charge for that. I just, do it live, and it's just spontaneous. We're doing it live like you and I are doing it. And because not everybody right now with COVID, a lot of people are hurting and can't afford a consultation. I'm a representative for Astrodience in the United States. So I include a Liz Green psychological horoscope analysis report with my consultations. And unless somebody already owns one, then they would, pay less. But I highly encourage everybody in Europe to go to Astrodience and get one of those charts. It's a psychological horoscope analysis by Liz Green. They're profound. They're about 22 pages, and they're fantastic. I'm only authorized to sell and print them in the United States, but I tell everybody about them. I was dating a Capricorn, actually, when I left my husband, and he said, "You tell everybody about this. You should get a cut out of it." So I wrote to Liz Green, actually not Liz, I wrote to Eloise, A-L-O-I-S, Eloise Trendle, who is the person in charge of Astrodience. He's the originator of all of it. And I asked him if I could be a distributor, and he said yes. And so he made me a distributor in 1995. So that report talks about your shadow. It's profound. When I first read mine, I want you to see something. This is how accurate it is. I had to read it in so many different colors of pens just to absorb this. It's all falling apart, This was in 1988, and I didn't know what the shadow was at all. What she said was in my shadow. I'm like, I'm not like that. I put it in the closet and forgot about it. 2 years later, I recognized it was me. 2 years.
It sometimes takes a while for the penny to drop, but I'm still smiling about it being a Capricorn who followed the script of his side and said, "There's a business opportunity here."
I know. Well, I left my husband because he was a stick in the mud. He was too practical. He was too rigid. He was not willing to risk, all the things that I actually had to learn how to become more practical that were in my shadow, that I had to learn to be more grounded and more realistic, because you could have taken me off the ceiling. I was like so Peter Pan that I would dream over and over and over that this young boy was stealing my car. All of this happened. I'm going to write more about all this, but this happened. And what was unconscious in me was following me through my dreams, through people, through experiences. So what I want to leave people with is that we're connected to the cosmos, and that we are completely safe in the sense that all of these things are happening for us. They're not happening to us. I feel the universe has always had our back, whether we knew it or not. That what we're really wanting is to be conscious. That's the goal. And only a person who is conscious of themselves will not go find somebody else to hate or put down or, whatever. It's like you have to recognize these things are in you. Otherwise, you will project them. And what Carl Jung said is that it was going to take all of us, one person at a time. Because if we're all overly idealistic in our new age culture, wanting to do the right thing, well, that is wonderful, but that's only an adaptation. That is not a transformation. What we want is transformation and healing on this planet. And for me, our relationships are sacred.
Well, they certainly are. And thank you so much for sharing your view and experience of the seventh house with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. Next week, we're going to be looking at draconic astrology. Remember, do subscribe, do share, and until next time, goodbye.